I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. We finally, in quite some time, have a full complement of the board. I want to officially welcome Lou Edsel to the board. Looking forward to having you be part of the RSU1 School Board. Normally I would take this time to make a few comments, but what I wanted to do was turn it over to any of the board members if they have anything they want to say about the education conference from this past week. It's a two-day conference. It's a conference that some of us attend. I don't know how many of you, I think, Alan, Jen, you folks attended. Is there anything that you wanted to share with us, or anything you found interesting or informative? Again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot. I have to put you on the spot.
I attended several of the sessions. One of the more interesting ones I attended was on the helping the schools to deal with heroin epidemic. It seems to be a hot topic today. I have some information that I hope to share with the principal of the middle school and the high school on a program that is available for them, free, involving attorney from the government and a gentleman from Skowhegan. I think it would be a very worthwhile situation. Not only designed for students, but also they would hold a meeting in the evening for parents, which ought to be helpful. Other things I checked on were child abuse and neglect reporting, charter schools, and proficiency-based education, which obviously is close to home. I have a lot of information on that. Probably it's the same thing that people are working with, but it doesn't hurt to get another view if I had that information. So I collected what I could, and we'll pass it on.
Great. Thanks, Alan. Jen?
I only went for one day for Thursday, but one of the takeaways that I was really surprised with is that they did a wonderful segment on STEM education. And it was interesting, and there were people from the Department of Education. And what they were talking about was trying to look at, when we teach the different components of STEM, that we teach them as relation to each other. It's not just so much how does math relate to technology or engineering. It is, you know, how do we teach math in a way that it will encourage the connection between all the STEM regions. And they did it, they actually even mentioned that it makes it part of how you design where the different classrooms are, where your different exposures are to it. So in the very design of how you put your facility, you can either support a STEM type of approach to education, or you can teach all the different components but teach them in isolation. So I thought that was really interesting as we look forward to what we might be looking forward to design and those kinds of ideas. So I thought that was very interesting. I attended a farm to school, which is a passion for myself, and also it would be interesting because it looked at the farm to school approach from kindergarten up through high school. So again, started thinking about how we might incorporate that into our new school design, depending on what we have for availability. And then I went to, very interesting, last one was meeting our new Commissioner of Education. And it was enlightening. I know him from another work experience, and it will be interesting. There were a lot of questions, but one was that we've had so many different commissioners, we need consistency. What will happen? How can we keep consistency? And it was very nice to see that the now deputy commissioner is back from his injury and he's there. He's still going to be a very strong voice, I think, in the transition period as the new commissioner gets used to state education. He doesn't have a lot of experience with it, so I think that we'll still have consistency there, which is good for what we're looking at going forward with our projects. And hopefully we'll get consistency and some sort of leadership in the commissioner's seat to kind of go forward and make big decisions that are coming up for us in the state.
Okay. Well, thank you both for attending. Thanks for sharing that. Our first item is to approve and amend the minutes of September 28th. You had those in your packet. Is there a motion regarding those minutes?
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Steve.
Second.
Second by Alan. Just take a moment to look those over. Any further discussion on those? Any changes? All those in favor of the motion to approve, raise your hand. None opposed? That passes. All right, item 5.0, adjustments to the agenda. I had one at the request of Steve under committee reports, 8.1. Finance Committee report. Patrick, did you have anyone else? Any adjustments to the agenda? Okay, so we'll add 8.1 Finance Committee report. Okay, item 6.0, public session. If there's anyone here that would like to speak to an item that's on the agenda, please feel free to get up. We also have a second public comment session at the end of the meeting, but if there's anything on the agenda that you'd like to address, please take the opportunity now. No one? Okay. On to staff reports. We have one report, sabbatical report. Patrick?
Yeah, we have Dan Madden, who's a member of our social studies department at Morse High School here tonight. And the board graciously granted him a sabbatical request last spring. And so we thought it was fitting for Dan to come back tonight and do a quick presentation to show you what he did during that time and how it has benefited RSU1.
Hi, I'm Dan Madden, and again, I'd like to thank you for approving my sabbatical. Here at Morse High School, for a lot of years, we taught an Asian Studies course, and I've been the teacher with that even after Dr. Patricia Ames started the course more than 40 years ago. I came to Morse primarily because of that course. My first teaching job was in Laconia, New Hampshire. I taught a world history course with a very old, obsolete world history book, and out of 32 chapters, about 2 of the end chapters were crammed: India, China, and Japan. And it was an area that a lot of my students were interested in, I was interested in, but I didn't know a lot about it. So I resigned my position and went to graduate school to major in international studies with a concentration on East Asia. Back then, Japan was all the rage in the mid-'80s, but my advisor was a China scholar, and he said, you know, Dan, he said, Japan's all well and good, but China's where you want to be looking. And I think he knew something. And so my first travel study with he and the program was in the summer of 1989. We went to China, and we were one of the only Western groups there because it was the summer of Tiananmen Square. So my introduction was a travel study for the summer of 1989. And I've since made, this is my 4th trip to China, and I've even led a Morse group there before the Olympics. We went in the summer of 2006. But this was something that every trip I've been there, one included the handover of Hong Kong in 1997 from the British to the Chinese, and I went west and ended up all the way at Mount Everest Base Camp, and then made my way back. But every time I've gone to China, the one shortcoming is the language. And even though the Asian Studies course is only a semester, a lot of the students ask, is there something we can do to learn a little bit of Chinese language? So I'm setting about the task to verse myself, and then I can share that with my students. Thank you. Yes, this is where I was in, I hope without the microphone. I have been taking courses at USM, and I'm one of the first of the group in the brand new Confucius Institute there at the University of Southern Maine. And my supervising professor is one of the directors of a university there, where the red dot is in Dalian, China. It's in Liaoning province, not far from Beijing. It's got a population of roughly 6 million people, and when you speak of Dalian to the Chinese, even in Dalian, they say, oh, it's not a very big city. But if we were to cut that out of China and put it in the United States, it would be our second or third largest city, bigger than Chicago and right around Los Angeles. But there, it's about the 25th largest. It's a coastal city right on the ocean, and while I was there, I had an opportunity to work. Once some of my professors found out I was a teacher and spoke English, that is something that they are trying very hard to teach their young students. So my class, I came and worked with these kids at about 4 o'clock, and they're about 7 years old. They've already put in a full day of school, and they're ready for more. I worked with them on Monday nights every now and then. This was the main building. My university was Dongbei University of Finance and Economics. It's a business university, but some of the courses are taught in English. So I thought that might be to my advantage. From that building up on the 11th floor, I took some pictures of the surrounding campus. Outside of my dorm was the Confucius statue that I got to pass every day. And all around the campus are small areas of just quiet and places I read and study. There was a stadium where they put on an international day, and one of the benefits of me going to university there, I tell my students, those of you planning on university, I'll be walking the walk with you, because to register for classes, to get my textbooks all in Chinese language that I'm not yet versed in was an experience, so I know what a lot of them go through on their first days at university. Here was, they host an international days, and I was living in a small dormitory room about the size of the middle of that table opening there. So the good thing is I had a single, and I got to meet, I thought I'd be the oldest of the oldest students in my dorm, but a lot of them are PhD students, so I wasn't that much older. I still was older, but some of my classmates, that was the benefit also of going here. Meeting so many motivated doctoral students that I'm thinking, well, these people are learning Chinese. They've got a number of degrees. Just classmates from Egypt and Morocco and Kazakhstan and places that I don't meet a lot of those people here in Bath. So we would meet once a week for a Chinese corner to try to practice our dialogue skills. And one of my classmates there, she's from the Netherlands, a master's degree in physics, a PhD in artificial intelligence. To me, that was one of the benefits of going back to university, just meeting these people that were just doing incredible things. And this was the building, the international building where I took my courses. But again, classmates from Pakistan. The gentleman all the way to the left, I never spoke to him much, but if you see the flag he's holding, that's the flag of North Korea. There were a lot of students there from North Korea, and that was a surprise to me. I didn't know a lot of students were allowed to leave North Korea and go to university. On International Day, we were asked to wear something from our home country, and I pack and travel light, so I was one of only 2 Americans in the entire university. So they were actually, these were my classmates from Thailand. But it's a city that's on the move, on the go. There are industrial parks. And again, for a lot of my students that want to do an international experience or in their university experience do a semester abroad, I have some contacts at universities now. There were medical universities, engineering universities, and my university, which was primarily finance and business. I can help them, and we'll continue with the contacts there. It's just a city that is tremendous. There's so much there. China is developing. From my first trip in 1989 to see where the development has taken them, it's almost as if I've lived a time-lapse photograph of 150 years in 30. The development there is at such a rate. By the way, that's a Kentucky Fried Chicken lit up there, that building there. Again, the housing, the number of buildings over 40 and 50 stories is just phenomenal. And it just goes on and on and on. The population density is there, and it's just continuing. They do have, Dalian is voted one of the most livable cities in China. It's on the ocean. The air quality is much better than inland in Beijing. But the traffic is unbelievable. But they have double-decker buses, so I was fortunate enough to sit up front and take some photographs. And again, those who have questions about the street food, there's always that. I didn't partake in a lot of the street food knowing I was going to be there for an entire semester. But you can get any type of cuisine, and it was a tremendous experience. I still wake up every morning and practice my flashcards. I set a 2-year goal, a 5-year goal, and I hope to bring some mid-pro students there someday, because I still stay in touch with my professors there, and I'll go back. I'll answer any questions if anybody would like.
How long have you been there for a whole semester?
Just one semester. I got there tail end of February, beginning of March, and their semester goes into July. But I also got to see, for the undergraduates, just the work ethic. Again, was motivating for me. The undergraduate students, there's no shortcuts. They work.
Do you think any of the people that you met will come here to visit you in Maine?
I'm certain of some of my classmates.
Yeah.
They stay in touch with me, and from France and other places in Europe, my Chinese friends. That's a difficulty though. Many of them are very positive thinking about the United States. Some of my friends' sons and daughters are here now. One's at the University of Washington, there are others, Stanford, and some other places.
It would be nice to bring them here for those people who can't travel. It's nice to bring the world.
Absolutely. I'm going to try to set up, I'm still in search of a Chinese corner for my Asian studies students and anybody who wants to partake to try some Chinese language.
Yeah.
I've shown them pictures of Bath and they loved it. They
Yeah.
loved the image.
Yes.
Any other questions for
Chinese?
My Chinese, it's getting slowly, incrementally, slowly, a little bit.
Dan, what's the biggest lesson that you bring back to share with your students? I mean, after taking this time, what's the greatest experience that you bring back to your students?
I think one of the benefits of working at Morse High School, and I'm not excluding any of the other schools, my colleagues are people I know. We have a lot of teachers who have a lot of background in their subject area. Mr. Joyce, who just retired, was a practicing lawyer at a JAG for many years in the Navy. He taught the law courses. Mr. O'Leary has been on Broadway, has worked in New York. Bob Jordan has worked on Wall Street. He teaches some economics. I like to think that I have a little bit of background, and I think my students appreciate somebody who's been to these places. So I don't know if there's a little cachet in that, but when they ask, I think they're curious for somebody, what was your experience? And there is experience. I don't profess to know everything, but I think they appreciate that.
Any other questions for Dan?
What does the Asian studies program?
We focus mainly on East Asia, but we introduce India, and then mostly China, Japan, and a little bit of Korea. I'd like to see if we can, in the very near future, branch into an additional China only.
Is it mostly a historical?
All of that. Historical, political, economic, cultural, yes. And it's a very enjoyable class for a lot of the students that I've had. I came here in the fall of 1989 and stepped right into it, and have been teaching it since. I also did the Tsugawa City exchange with my oldest son when he was much younger, so I've lived with a Japanese family there for 2 weeks, and none of them spoke English as well, so that in itself is an experience in learning.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, on to item 8.1, Finance Committee report. I'll turn this over to Steve.
Just briefly, because under old business, we're going to talk about the bond. We did meet, the Finance Committee did meet beginning of October. And Dick Rannigan was there, our financial advisor, and we discussed options on bonding, which we'll go over as another agenda item. We also did a preliminary walkthrough of the budget schedule for this upcoming year. And I would again invite all board members to attend our meetings. We find them very informative, give them good insight and good preparation for the budget discussions, ensuing budget discussions coming up in March. That's it.
Any questions for Steve? Next Finance Committee meeting is November 5th, I think, 8 o'clock. Anybody can attend? Okay, next item, 9.0, Superintendent's Report. Patrick?
On October 9th, just to give you an update, there was a professional development day, and we had proficiency-based education theme across the district, pre-K to 12. And really it was an introduction for our K to 8 people, but a continuation for our 9 to 12 folks. And 3 Morse teachers came down to the K to 8 that was held at Woolwich and really did an exemplary job of sharing the work that's being done at Morse, because they're taking the lead with proficiency-based education. And it was very well received, again, by the K-8 staff. And also thank you to Judy Harvey, who's here tonight, for organizing that whole day across the district. Our Career and Technical Center educators were at a statewide conference that day, but those are the only people that were not involved in the proficiency-based education work that we did. On October 14th, we had our first district-wide wellness morning where all the staff could do anything from yoga to massage to walking to jogging, whatever they'd like to do. Very well received, and we typically do one of those a year, possibly 2. You saw in probably Jay Pinkerton's report, just impressive that we had 25 students at Morse High School that were recognized for their AEP, which is Advanced Placement test scores. And so we had 25 students overall acknowledged, and some of those were acknowledged on a national level and others on a state level. The Morse Fall Play, called Almost Maine, begins this Wednesday, and Kevin, I think it runs through Friday, is that accurate?
Yes, sir. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 7.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Good. And I'd encourage anybody to come up to that. And then just lastly, the boardwalks. I think quite a few of you signed up for those, but just a reminder, they're on November 10th and November 17th. So go ahead and sign up if you haven't already done so.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Patrick? All right, we'll move on to financial report. Deborah?
Good evening. Your report tonight is for the month of September, and based upon our expenses so far, we've spent 12.5%, and when I pull and compare to last year we spent 12.1%. So it's pretty much in line with how we move forward with our expenses. Just getting started, because July and August, you don't see any or not many of the teacher salaries applied to the financial report. But those have started in now. So for September, we basically look at budget versus actual for how we did with our hiring, which we're about 125,000 to the good in hiring, and but yet then that we know is a good figure because we'll have retirees coming out of that and that sort of thing. So but it kind of gives you a general idea of where we're at overall. Tuition, Tim last month asked for an estimate on the tuition revenue, and based upon what we're just looking at our final numbers at the moment, and we're going to be about, right now it shows about 70,000 short, but that's without any tuition increase at all. So we will have a tuition increase. We budget flat. So I'm hoping that with that tuition increase, we'll probably be closer in around $20,000 range. And then, of course, you know, we have students moving in and moving out. And so I think we're in pretty good shape at this point.
Okay, any questions for Deborah on the report? Okay, thank you. All right, on to old business. First item of old business is the 2015-2016 board goals. You've received some language around those goals. I'd like you to take a look at that. Is there any discussion on this? I think the last meeting we voted to approve these goals, but contingent upon language, so just take a moment to read these over and make sure you're comfortable with this language. Questions on these? Lou?
I just have a question. The language is fine. The language seems fine to me. I just wanted a question of and how will we monitor these throughout the year? What's the plan?
It's a good question. What we typically do with the goals, we try to get something in place, you know, early in the year, September or October at the latest. And then sort of the onus falls on Patrick. Board goals will be an agenda item at every meeting, and it's something that, you know, we put it on the agenda with the intent of, if there's something that we haven't been addressing or we feel is pertinent, that's the time to bring it up for the next meeting. But also, Patrick and the administration throughout the year we'll do certain presentations around those goals. But I think first and foremost, it really falls to the board. It's on our agenda every month, just so that we keep this in the forefront. Don't forget about it.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or comments on the language? Okay. Item 10.2. This is second reading of policy IHBGA. The policy is homeschooling participation in school programs. We looked at this last month. This is, again, the second reading. It is an action item. Is there a motion on this policy? Move to approve by Jen. Second by Steve. Any discussion on this?
What we try to do is, we did a little research on the homeschool one, talked with the Maine Principals Association and other organizations, so we're comfortable with the language in the homeschooling, and then what we tried to do, not to get ahead of it, but we tried to do on the private school and the charter school was to use the same language in both of those, and hopefully you're comfortable with that, but the homeschool could not have that same language.
Okay, when you say that though, I did notice that the language that was added regarding we had talked about last time, the participation in extracurricular activities, the language is the same through all three policies. It's not?
One of the items was missing in the one on charter school students, because I made a note to see that it was included.
Yeah. But I mean, the line that says,
Basically,
a student in RSU1 schools will not be denied the opportunity to participate in favor of a homeschooled student. That language is now consistent regardless of whether it's homeschool, private school, or charter school. And I thought we made the distinction between the two.
Yeah, I guess I had a different draft, but you're right, that should not be on page 6 of that homeschool one. That top red should not be there in a homeschool.
Okay. So Jennifer, you've made the motion to approve. Would you be willing to amend your motion with that change?
Yes.
So to strike the language
Yep.
on page 6 at the top in red? Okay.
Need a second? I'll second.
Okay. So currently on the floor, there's a motion to approve policy IHBGA with the amendment of removing the language in red at the top of page 6. Any further discussion on this?
I'd like to know the reason why that is suggested to be stricken.
I think, and again, policy can probably speak to this better than I can, but I think when we had the discussion last time, a homeschool student is more a student of the RSU of the district than, say, someone attending a charter school or a private school. So in the case of extracurricular activities, we would treat a homeschool student equally as a student of the RSU because we essentially are their school. They don't have these opportunities through the homeschool situation. Whereas with a private school or a charter school, the situation's a little different. I don't know if I got that correct or...
I remember the term coming out, the school of record. I don't know if that was exactly that. We were talking about this and that. I can't remember. But it was, they do have the other, a private school or a charter school student has another school. They do belong to another entity. A homeschooling student, you know, has more of a connection to our communities because they're residing there and they're not participating in another school. But I think it goes back to not so much what our opinion was, but how the state looks at them as who they're tied to.
Does that answer your question, Alan? Okay. Any other comments? Questions? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve with the amendment, raise your hand. Opposed? Abstain? Okay, with one abstention, that motion passes. Okay, item 10.3, second reading of policy JJIAA, private school students. Again, this is an action item. Is there a motion on this policy?
Move to approve.
Move to approve by Bill.
Second.
Second by Alan. Any further discussion on this?
Yeah.
Steve?
The language doesn't track the charter school language, at least in one place. Under 2, participation in extracurricular activities, what is our paragraph G? It goes back to the RSU1. may assess an additional share to the private school for costs. I think I asked that change to shall assess. And on the charter school one, it was shall. So I would ask for that change to be made for this policy as well.
Bill, are you willing to amend your motion
Yeah.
to, on page 2, item G, remove the word may, replace it with the word shall?
Let's just ask Patrick, how many students we have roughly who would be contributing, participating in extracurricular activities?
From private schools?
Yeah, for private schools.
I don't know that we have any at this point right now. We had one 2 years ago at the middle school level that joined a soccer team, but I'm not aware of any right now, but I might have to check with Scott, but it hasn't been. Homeschool, charter school, and private school has not become an issue for us or a concern for us, but I think we want to be proactive. Yeah.
I thought probably middle school rather than high school level because a private high school, in all probability, would have programs.
I can tell you, I know currently at Woolwich, there's a situation with one, maybe 2 students right now from private schools who participate in programs, athletics at Woolwich. And I know of 1 or 2 students who will be doing the same this spring at BMS. So I think once the policy passes, one of the responsibilities the district has is to make sure that the buildings and the athletic directors are aware that this policy is in place. So. Any other questions, comments on this?
Did Mr. Walker participate? He did. Okay, so he's aware.
Went to the principals and to Scott, our athletic directors.
This is really not a discussion on athletic policy. I mean, I think it's
He'd be more apt to be affected by it, perhaps.
Yeah, but it's it's fair. If there's an additional cost carried by the district to cover the participation of kids who in other ways not financially contribute to their education in the district, then I think it's just absolutely clear to me that fairness to the taxpayers is that those folks should pay their way.
I want your teams to. I'm with you.
It could be a 14-year-old Tom Brady, but if it costs money to suit him up, he ought to pay.
Okay. The motion on the floor, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Okay, none opposed, that passes unanimously. All right, items 10.4, second reading of policy JJIAAB. This is reference to charter school students' access to public school, interscholastic, and extracurricular activities. Is there a motion on this policy? Move to approve?
Yes. Second.
Okay, move to approve by Bill, second by Jen. Any further discussion? Alan?
I don't see the phraseology, a student enrolled in the RSU1 school will not be denied opportunity to participate in favor of a student in the charter school.
Top paragraph on this section page. Last sentence. Thing you have to say about it.
Yeah.
If you want us to do that someplace else.
Yeah.
It's just not in red like the other one.
Sorry, I overlooked it.
It had been in this one, and it hadn't been in the other ones originally.
That was already.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Steve?
There's a section in the private school policy that we just adopted that deals with appeals. which isn't carried into the charter school policy, which we haven't adopted yet. And I just wonder if there's a reason for that, or is it a draft?
It says no, I'm not subject to it.
Yeah, and why
though?
Yeah, well, why doesn't it track? I mean, I would think that these two policies, except for the fact that one says private school, the other says charter school, would track, word for word, paragraph, paragraph. I'm just not sure why they don't, but there may be a reason.
That part of the policy didn't come up for discussion. I don't have my notes, so we didn't look at that, so. I can't speak to why it's not there.
I mean, I'm comfortable with the way private school policy is drafted. I would be comfortable with the charter school policy if it simply substituted one for one.
What is the, if you look back at the private one, you still have that line in there, decisions resulting in selection shall not be subject to appeal, but then at the very end it has an added appeals. Back to the private one. So you've got, those are referring to different things that you can appeal or not appeal?
So I think it's referring, in the second page of that, I think it's referring to if someone feels like we should follow the policy or was against, that gives them the opportunity in the back to appeal. But as far as a decision, if the policy was followed, they would be able to appeal.
Oh, I see, okay.
So we have a motion on the table to approve as written. Is there any further discussion on this? You want to suggest an alternative?
I would just like to table the charter school policy for now, just to send it back to the committee and see if that appeal section, something that's relevant, should be reinserted or should be inserted. And to look at other formatting issues with the charter school policy and just see if it can track the private school policy.
Bill, would you like to move your motion? Withdraw your motion?
Does Steve move to table?
Well, we currently have one motion on the table, so if you're willing to withdraw.
The motion in favor of the table.
So Steve, would you like to make a motion to table?
I'd move we table the charter school policy. Send it back to the policy committee to
Find out why it's
Is there a second to that motion? Okay, second by Lou. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Okay, so this is tabled until next meeting. Okay, on to item 11, new business. We'll begin with item 11.1, personnel items. Patrick, you have a couple of retirements.
Yeah, just two retirements to notify you of. First is Beth Whitney, music teacher at Woolwich, and I'd like to thank her for 34 years of service. And Charlie Main, a social studies teacher at Morse High School, and at the end of this year, he'll be retiring after 40 years in the system. So I'd like to thank him for his years of service as well.
Okay, item 11.2. We need to take a vote on new versus renovation regarding the Morse High School building project. As you know, you all attended, we had a public forum a couple weeks ago to discuss this. I think we've gone over this issue in depth, including that meeting and the discussion we had prior, some other committee meetings. This is an action item tonight. Is there somebody who would be willing to make a motion regarding vote on new versus renovation?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we proceed with the development of plans for a new Morse High School.
Okay. Motion by Alan to move forward with new. Second by Bill. Any further discussion from the board? All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Okay, motion passes.
I was just going to abstain because I
Okay, so one abstention.
One abstention.
Okay, item 11.3, bond discussion. Turn that over to you, Patrick, or Deborah?
Well, I'll say just a couple of very brief things, I guess, which was, again, at the Finance Committee meeting at the beginning of the month, Dick Rattigan was there. He presented 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different scenarios on how to put our, what we currently have as a bond anticipation note, how to convert that into a bond. And I'll let you cover the details. It was agreed by the committee. Unfortunately, at that meeting, the committee constituted you and I. We're down a couple of committee members, which we hope we can get those folks to committee meetings soon. But the proposal is to put the bonds out in a couple of years. I'll let you cover the detail.
I'll start, Deb, but you can be up there in case I make an error. But in talking to our financial advisor, it made the most sense for the district overall with the way that our debt is retiring over the next 10 years. So the plan, we have spent $3.7 million of we were approved for $5.2 million, the bond was. And so we've spent 3.7, we're done spending. When we did this project, we said that we would pay it back over a 10-year period. So we still are doing that, but our plan that makes the most sense for the system is to probably this summer, after July 1, is go out and turn this band into a bond. And then we have up to 2 years from that time to be able to start making principal payments. And so the worksheet that you have in front of you really lays out that we'll have some interest to pay in the first 2 years, and then 2018-19 will be our first principal payment. Deb, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's correct. It was the intent at the beginning to even out the debt service to our declining debt, and this option that Dick presented was the most, we met that goal with this option 9. So we'll sell the bonds this spring, this summer actually, and go from there.
So I just want to get clarification, and I think that I'm assuming the sheet that we are focusing on is the one with the yellow highlight. So current total is existing debt that the district has at this point, or is that?
That's correct. 26 million. We'll be adding 3.7 to that, so that puts us to 31 million.
Okay. So this is current total. This highlighted in the purple is both interest and principal payments?
Yes.
Okay. And that would give us the new total. And so in the final column, increase or decrease over previous year. So by adding, because we're retiring existing debt, even though we're adding this new debt, other than 1 year, 2018, 2019, we see a decrease each year of what we're paying on debt as a district.
That's correct.
Over previous year.
Right. because the revenue also is impacting that difference. Not only is the expenses going away, but the revenue is also going away that the state supported debt. So by putting that debt out, the principal payment in 2 years, then that's the impact way over on the right-hand side that we'd see. If we started that debt service payment in 16-17, which is our next year's budget, we'd see an increase to the budget of $420,000. And that's because it's not, the timing isn't what our intent was.
So again, and you've got to bear with me here, current total is what we are currently paying each year annually, principal and interest.
That's correct.
Purple is principal and interest of the bond.
Correct.
Okay. So we never see that this is what we wanted to do. We didn't want to have an impact on the budget where we saw a big increase, and in fact we're seeing a relative decrease. Anyone else have any questions with this? I'm just trying to work through this on my own, but any other questions from the board on this?
Devin, I'm struggling a little bit. I've never looked at this kind of a layout like this before, but if we go over to the impact and the budget expense impact for 16-17, does that mean that the budget impact that we're looking at for the next year's budget is going to be decreased by that much than what we were expecting? I guess I'm having a hard time.
It's actually an increase of that $1,900, but what it is a combination of, it's a decrease in your, it's an increase in your expenses, but it's a decrease in your revenue too. The combination between the two of them is the budget impact.
Gotcha.
It's not just on the expense side or just on the revenue side.
Okay, it's becoming clear now. Yes. Okay. And that's going to equal 1913.
Yes.
Okay.
And the only revenue that we're losing is revenue that comes from the state to cover previous debt.
Correct.
Okay. There's no other revenue.
No other. It's basically the vocational center is going away, that debt.
Right.
These are exact numbers, not just projected.
Right. Based upon what if they sell the bond for those exact figures. Now, when it goes out on the market and the interest rates may adjust and that sort of thing, then that piece of that 3.7 million would adjust.
Now, before we go out to bond, we still have the ban, correct?
Right, and when we go out to bond, the money that we get from the bond will pay off the bank.
But we have, prior to bonding this in 2016, 2017, we do have payments towards this over the next couple of years.
We have an interest payment which Dick projected would be about $17,000, he said, because we're going to have, it's just interest.
But that's not included in this work?
No.
Okay, so the total budget impact for 2014, 2015, and 2015, and 2016, add another 17?
You could, yes.
Okay.
I think this scenario was recommended by the Finance Committee largely because it smooths the payments out over time. As Deb indicated, were we to start repaying this interest and principal earlier, it would cause a significant jump next year.
He gave us different scenarios, like if we went out for 15 years or if we went out for 20 years, but it was the original intent of the whole bond to go 10 years and, you know, so that's what we feel is the safest and the way that the intent was of that
Okay, and then
project.
just again, so I've got clarity here, I see under the 10-year payment, I can match up the $52,725 as an initial pre-interest payment. The $105,450, where does that show up on the payment schedule? Is that a combination of two of the interest payments?
Yeah, so I think it's a January and a July on. There's a schedule there right from Dick. Looks a little bit, yeah, looking at that. Yeah, that's 2 interest payments. And then the 3rd year is the big.
So then the $470,000, that's a principal payment plus 99. So it's a principal plus 2 interest payments.
Right.
Okay. All right, I think I've got it. Anyone else?
And I think just to reiterate, I think when we told the taxpayers when we went out to the public to approve this this bond initially was that the added borrowing would not increase year to year our debt payments. In fact, it does not under this schedule.
Okay. Thanks, Deborah. All right, on to item 11.4. We have a couple of first readings. We'll begin with 11.4A, policy JKF, disciplinary removal of students with disabilities. Short policy. Any questions or comments from the policy committee on this? Okay, be prepared to vote on that one at the next meeting. Item 11.4B, policy IHBAA and IHBAAR, referral policy and procedures. Any questions, comments, discussion on this one?
I've got some questions.
Steve?
In the first line of the policy, you talk about school-age students suspected of having a disability. And who may suspect? You understand what I mean? Is this a responsibility of a teacher or a parent?
Yeah, it could be any of them. It could be teacher, it could be parent, guardian that makes the request, so to speak.
That makes the request. Again, the use of the word suspect. Then there's a reference in the where you start that full paragraph of red added material. You talk about the initial child find activities. That's a term of art, I guess. Should we define it somewhere? I personally don't. I think I understand what you mean with what the child find activity is, but I'm not 100% sure. I would just suggest you think about it definition if others feel that's. And then again, later in that same paragraph, you talk about general education, the general education intervention process. And I think I understand what that means. It means that an intervention in the course of providing a mainstream education. But again, I don't know if that's a term of art that needs a definition or not. And then just before that, you talk about the completion of the general education intervention process. And my question there was, I mean, how do you know it's complete? What marks completion of the general education process? Is it came at a grade level? Is it certain benchmarks that are established in the classroom? Those are my questions.
Is the, I know it's a different policy, but what's in here, a lot of what's in here, the terms are in this other one. So like the general education interventions are these meant to, I mean, are there separate policies, correct? But are they just, one is explaining. Right, but this kind of, I'm just saying some of the terms, the way they're laid out in this one, the second one, which we haven't looked at yet,
Right.
is, you know, I think explains, it makes this clear to me when I read through it.
But we should, every policy should be followed.
Right, that's what I'm saying, so you may want to take some of the language from there.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on this one?
By school age, correct me if I'm wrong, but in some school districts are going to be in a public school program until you're 20. Is that referring to like 4 to 20 as school age?
Anyone else on this policy? Okay, we'll see you at the next meeting then. Item 12.0, our second public comment session. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Please come on up to the mic, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pat Silva, and I live on Lincoln Street. And I just wanted to say thank you to the board for voting for a new school, because I would have been one of those homeowners that might have been affected if you had gone for renovation. My question is, even though the school board did vote for a new school, could that at any point be overturned by the citizens of the city of Bath or by the Department of Education of the state of Maine?
I can speak a little bit about what the process is going forward, and I'm going to lean on Patrick if I get it wrong. What happens next is, now that the board has decided to go with new as opposed to renovate, it really starts to move the process forward and give it some definition. We have already identified 3 potential sites, really narrowed it down to 2, and both of those sites happen to be owned by the City of Bath. City of Bath seems to be willing to sell them, but in terms of the price that they come up with and how that process transpires, at this point it's in their hands. Once they establish a price, and it's something that the State Department of Education feels is fair, and we can come up with a purchase and sales agreement, I think at that point the community will have a straw vote. The board will select one property that we decide to go with, and we'll bring the public together, we'll have a discussion, and then the public will weigh in on that. If they vote in favor of the property that we're presenting to the community, then we move ahead with that property. If they vote that down, to some degree, I think we go back to square one. My assumption is we would go back to looking at an alternate site. I don't think we will be revisiting the renovation piece. Okay. So hopefully that answers your question, and hopefully I got that correct. Okay, I guess I'm paying attention.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else from the public? Okay. This was a quick meeting, folks. Item 13.0, set next meeting dates and location. We are scheduled to meet the 23rd of November. We're meeting at Dyke Newell. Add that to your calendars. Any questions about the date? Concerns? Okay, item 14.0, is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Bill, second by Alan. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, raise your hand. This is a record, folks. It is 7:06 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
No, I know.